Hi, I'm Stan Musick, M-U-S-I-C-K. I'm a pilot for the Commemorative Air Force, Airbase, Georgia. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and about our airplane and how we became a movie star. I got my first airplane ride when I was 12 years old in an old V-tail Bonanza, and I was hooked. And after that, I worked hard, saved my dollars, and the next time I got in an airplane, I was taking lessons. I took lessons, I soloed, and I got my private pilot license at age 17, and I bought my first airplane before I graduated high school. And no, Mom and Daddy didn't get it for me. I earned that one by working for an old crop duster, helping rebuild a 7AC Champ, helping rebuild a Cessna 195, and flagging. Back in the days when a flagman was literally a person that stood in the field and waved the flag and got sprayed every time. So I did that. I went on to get my commercial license, my instructor certificate, did some crop dusting, flew commercially for a while, ultimately did some other things, but always kept up my interest in aviation. I absolutely was hooked on warbirds after reading Gordon Baxter in Backseat Flying Magazine years ago. He ended up getting those published as Log of a Passenger Pilot, which is a great book if you can find a copy. And it tells a lot about how Gordon Baxter fell in love with flying. And his love affair with the Stearman led to my love affair with the Stearman. So when I got to where I could, I bought a Stearman and I learned to fly it because my goal was to recreate for myself the training that the World War II pilots had. So I did flying in a Stearman, fell in love with a T6, bought a T6, flew that, and then lucked up into getting involved with the CAF when I lived in West Texas, back in the days when the CAF was headquartered in Midland, Texas. Flew the CAF P-40, ended up buying my own Hawker Sea Fury, Mustang, and now I've gotten to fly the P-47, the Hawker Sea Fury, as I mentioned, the Mustang, and now I fly the Corsair and the Mustang for the Commemorative Air Force, Airbase, Georgia. So people ask, how do you get to fly a Corsair? Well, first, you have to have a Corsair to fly. If you're lucky enough, as I was, to be involved with the CAF, then you go through the CAF training route. The basic amount of that is you have to have significant tailwheel time, including an absolute minimum of 200 hours of T6 time and proficiency in the backseat of a T6. There was a saying in World War II, son, if you can fly a T6, you can fly anything. And I would say that's pretty accurate if you just add to that the one adverb. If you can fly the T6 well, you can fly any World War II aircraft. So you gain proficiency in the backseat of a T6, and then preferably if you can get some other fighter time, that's wonderful, but if not, you get in a Corsair, and your first flight in a Corsair is your first solo. So to fly a Corsair, first, the hardest part is getting in the darn thing. It is, you notice it's way up there, and you have to climb up the side, and you have to be careful not to fall off. There's a little small dent in that right wing from my chin where I fell off of it several years ago. But the thing that's unique about the Corsair and many of these World War II fighters is the limited visibility in the three-point position. So you'll notice where the pilot sits, you have very little visibility in that cone in front of you. So one of the key things is S-turning on your way out to the runway, making sure the runway's clear before you bring up power. And it does have power. 2,000 horsepower in this R2800, a large engine that it was infamous in World War II for being both powerful and reliable. So when you bring up the power on takeoff, there's an immediate tendency for the aircraft to turn left. And in World War II, if you're flying off a carrier, you had the big advantage of turning into the wind. You had the downside of it was a short runway and there wasn't a lot of room. But the airplane is more of a handful in the wind than many of the other World War II types. So when you bring up the power, you have to fight the left turning tendency. There's several things that cause that. One is the large propeller, which has P factor, and we can talk about that more if we have time. It also has the gyroscopic precession, which wants to turn the aircraft left. And then you have the Coriolis effect of the air spinning around the aircraft, and you have torque. Torque is a factor in all aircraft, but it's a much bigger factor with the more powerful aircraft. However, once the aircraft is airborne and the gear comes up, it's an absolute delight and joy. The controls are very well harmonized. It is a little bit awkward in that the rudder travel is huge, and you have to make sure that you're set up where you can get all of your feet full forward for full rudder, but not be so cramped that you can't do everything that you need to do. but it does delightful aerobatics. It goes up and over and does beautiful barrel rolls. And there's some great videos out there of and I think Mo's got a link to it, of us flying the Corsair at an air show. So the saying, right place, right time, is everything. We did a flyover for a football game in Statesville, and several years ago. And at that time, one of our members, Philip Beagle, who you may meet later on, happened to be talking to the director of the movie Devotion as they were getting set up with the fake aircraft carrier deck to film the movie Devotion. And the conversation evolved into, do you want to see the Corsair fly? My T6 was there, and I had another pilot who could fly my T6 for me, and I took the Corsair, and we did a beautiful little formation flight where they were able to see the Corsair. And the director loved it. And he asked us to participate in the movie, and so we got to make part of the movie Devotion. This aircraft was painted in movie paint with the number 203 on the side. You ask, what's movie paint? Movie paint is how they create much of the magic of movies. They brought the aircraft into our hangar, cleaned everything else out, and they made a paint that consisted of color, floor wax, and whiskey. Why the whiskey? I'm not sure, but it went on beautifully. And as you'll see, if you see the movie Devotion, you'll see an absolute perfect looking aircraft that had paint on it, that all it had to do was be washed off at the end of the movie. And it was a fabulous thing for us to see this airplane transform from its current paint job into an authentic paint job for the movie Devotion with number 203 on the nose. So how do you prepare to fly in a movie? Well, one of the first things you have to have is a SAG card, a Screen Actors Guild card. So we had to go through the procedure to obtain that card, which involves both contracting for the movie, being paid by the movie, and being able to get the aircraft in the movie. Then we had daily briefings for our flying. And the thing that I have found from shooting more than one movie is you always do it over and over. It's just like in the movies. So they say, cut, and then you go back and do it again. Only as opposed to a set where the actors are responding directly to the director, there's an aerial director that's on the radio, and he says, okay, cut, go back to where you started. So you fly back to where you started, and you fly the sequence again. This Corsair in the movie flew the beach sequences, and there's a couple of beach sequences in the movie, and you'll see the Corsair, our movie star, in the movie. So an aircraft carrier deck was created on the airport at Statesboro, Georgia. And you say, how could you have an aircraft carrier deck at Statesboro, Georgia? They built an entire set and had it set up with blue screen. Blue screen is part of the movie magic, where they can then project things behind it. So the aircraft carrier deck, where the scenes were carried out, the actors were talking in front of the aircraft, where the aircraft would be moved back, be moved forward. Greg Scott, one of our ground guys, spent an enormous amount of time moving the aircraft, getting things positioned. He was a key and integral part of getting this done. So they would have scenes shot on this set in Statesboro, Georgia. And when I see it in the movie, I know exactly where it was, but it looks like a carrier out in the middle of the ocean because of the movie magic. People ask me all the time, what was the best part about flying in that movie? And there was actually a couple of things. One was getting to work with the actors. The actor that played Jesse Brown came and spent a couple of days just briefing with me and flying the T6. And we went out and I got to show him what it was like and what he would feel and the hand motions he would make so that he could put his hands correctly, so he would have his hands right. And he did an absolutely excellent job. When you see the movie, you wouldn't know, except that I was there, how they went about carrying that off. But the more important thing is that participating in this movie allowed me to do the three things that the CAF tries to do. We talk about inspire, educate, and honor. And if you can't read Jesse Brown's story and watch that movie without being inspired to be able to overcome obstacles and be able to push past things, then you really need to pay more attention to it. The inspiration of that movie was tremendous. It helps us to educate. People call the Korean War the Forgotten War because World War II gains lots of well-deserved attention. I love reading World War II history, but the Korean War it was often not spoken about. My father was there, and for years he would barely, if ever, talk about it. And when I got to film this movie, it gave me a connection with my dad because I got to see a whole lot about the Korean War that I didn't really appreciate until I got to participate in this movie. And the best part about it was getting to honor people. We got to honor Jesse Brown, Tom Hudner, other people that we got to honor the guys on the ground. If you watch that movie and you watch how the guys on the ground suffered in the cold and how they dealt with an enormously depressing way of trying to fight a battle, and you got to see the aircraft carriers, you get to see the planes, you get to see people from all pieces of that war. So we get to inspire people, educate people, and honor people. And that's our goal in the Commemorative Air Force.